Soul Streaming Entry 16. Being weird is my superpower. A living, breathing audio and written experience by Sim. I'm currently sitting on the patio feeding the birds, and I keep thinking about the word weird. Why does that word always carry a bad reputation? Why does eccentric automatically mean something is wrong? Why does going against the grain suddenly become a flaw instead of a signal? If that's the definition, then I guess I'm weird. And I am letting my freak flag fly. I've always been weird, from childhood to wearing colorful clothes when everyone else blended in, before my awakening, after my awakening, with money, without money, in relationships, outside of relationships. I've always been different, not louder, not better, just wired differently. And yeah, I've gone through layers, seasons of masking my weirdness, seasons of toning it down, seasons of testing what would happen if I tried to be more digestible. For multiple reasons: safety, belonging, acceptance. And every one of those reasons taught me something about myself. But I always came back to the same conclusion. I feel the most like me when I step outside the box. I feel the most authentic when I stop trying to smooth out my edges. I've always felt strange, even when I wasn't trying to be. It's not something I perform. It's not something I try to manufacture. It's not rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It's instinct. It's perception. It's awareness that refuses to shut itself off. And somewhere along the way, I realized something. Being weird is my superpower. It always has been. Because weirdness is what kept me from blindly recycling belief systems. It's what kept me curious. It's what made me question instead of conform. It's what made me choose alignment over applause. And when I stopped trying to outrun that part of myself, I stopped feeling fractured. I started feeling powerful. What the world calls weird. Society calls a lot of things weird. Quitting a stable job without another one lined up because your spirit said leave. Living off savings while building something no one else can see yet without any secure or steady income coming in. Speaking to all things in nature. Having a relationship with trees. Trusting the wisdom they carry. Feeling like they respond. Believing you are divinely guided by spirits and beings unseen to the human eye. Saying no to relationships that look good on paper but feel wrong in your body. Shit, that's weird. Trusting your inner knowing over external validation. Moving when you're called instead of when it's convenient. Building a life based on alignment instead of applause. That's weird too, I guess. But weird is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. Choosing solitude over constant socializing, not laughing at jokes that don't sit right with you, not wanting the promotion everyone else is fighting for, dressing in colors that feel like you instead of what's trending, questioning traditions you were told not to question, refusing to buy something just because it has a label, saying that doesn't resonate even when everyone else nods in agreement, caring deeply when others detach, detaching when others perform care, needing quiet in a loud world, being loud in a quiet one. That's weird too. Anything that disrupts the unspoken agreement of how you're supposed to show up can be labeled strange. Anything that doesn't synchronize with the dominant rhythm can be considered offbeat. And most of the time, it isn't that you're wrong, it's that you're not mirroring. Maybe weird is just what happens when someone refuses to abandon themselves to make other people comfortable. Maybe weird is simply the refusal to shrink your awareness to fit into a smaller room. The glasses. But here's what I've come to understand: weird isn't instability, weird is expanded perception. Weird is having access to layers other people haven't trained themselves to see. It's like walking into a 3D movie where everyone else forgot to pick up their glasses. Without the glasses, the screen looks flat. With them, the world has depth, shadows, and shapes, movement beneath movement. And maybe the truth is, I've always had the glasses, but I didn't always know how to wear them. I had to grow into my sight. I had to question what I was told, unlearn what was handed to me, adjust the lens, take it off, put it back on again. I'm not someone who just knows it all. I'm someone who has believed things fully at one stage of my life and later expanded beyond them. Not because they were wrong, but because I grew, because awareness widened, because experience refined me. I've held perspectives that felt complete at the time, and then life invited me to see deeper. And I accepted the invitation. I'm someone who has always been willing to look again, to revisit a belief I once stood on, to question a truth I once repeated, to ask myself if the lens I was using still fit the level of awareness I was standing in. Wearing the glasses is not about being superior, it's about openness. It's about understanding that perception evolves. And sometimes when people call something weird, what they really mean is unfamiliar. Sometimes they mean threatening. Sometimes they mean, I don't see the way you see. Weirdness is often just someone else's discomfort with a perspective they haven't grown into yet. And I've learned not to internalize someone else's ceiling as my limit. Looking again is not weakness, it's expansion. It's the refusal to freeze in a single version of myself just because it once felt safe. Curiosity is the compass. Looking again is what changed everything. Because when you're willing to look again, you start to see the patterns. You start to see how belief systems are inherited before they are chosen. You start to see how fear dresses itself up as logic, how tradition can disguise itself as truth, how normal is often just repetition. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. My awareness made me pause before adopting what everyone else seemed so comfortable carrying. It made me ask, who decided this? Who benefits from this belief? Does this actually feel true in my body? Curiosity has always been my compass, just a steady willingness to question. And that questioning opened my imagination. Because once you realize that most systems are constructed, you also realize something else. They can be reconstructed. That's when it clicked. If belief systems shape behavior, and behavior shapes experience, then experience is influence. And if it's influence, then I am not powerless inside of it. Wearing the 3D glasses doesn't just let you see the layers, it lets you see the mechanics. You start to notice how fear programs scarcity, how scarcity programs survival, how survival programs silence, and you also start to notice how imagination programs possibility, how possibility programs movement, how movement programs expansion. My awareness made me willing to imagine beyond what I was shown. It helped me accept that I am the creator of my reality in all the ways my imagination would allow and not limit, regardless of what I'm told and regardless of what I see. It can never outrank what I know to be true because truth is not loud, it is steady. And the more I leaned into my weirdness, the more steady I became. The more steady I became allowed more flow in the forward trajectory of my life, chasing the sprinkles. And if I only have one life to live, then chasing the sprinkles in life is the goal. Now, do I actually believe we only have one life? No. I believe in parallel universes. I believe in timelines. I believe we are living more than one layer at once. I don't experience life as linear. I experience it as layered, as if multiple timelines brush up against each other and we get to feel the edges, as if more than one version of us exists at once. But in this body, in this moment, I choose to be here. And if I am here, then this moment matters. And if it matters, then I get to choose how I move within it. If this reality is not working for me, if this situation is not working for me, if this experience is not working for me, then what do I want to choose instead? That question is how I chase the sprinkles, not by escaping, by selecting, by recognizing that I am not trapped inside a fixed script. I am interacting with it. My awareness made me playful with the universe. It made me curious about outcomes. It made me willing to experiment. It also made me observant. There was always a part of me that knew I was collecting data, watching dynamics, watching energy shifts, watching who was celebrated and who was dismissed for being themselves. In between spaces. Looking back, I realized something. I wasn't just collecting data, I was learning how to move between worlds. Not fully popular, not fully unpopular, but close enough to both to understand the mechanics. I thought differently. I questioned traditions. I never accepted something simply because it had always been done that way. I wanted to know who decided it, who benefited from it, whether it actually made sense. I felt deeply, and I expressed those feelings as honestly as I knew how, even when it made people uncomfortable, even when depth was mistaken for intensity. I rejected conventional timelines. I never wanted marriage or children just because it was time. I wanted to heal the generational cycles that were plaguing my lineage before I ever passed anything forward. That was considered weird. Leaving stable jobs to pursue passion was considered irresponsible. Living unconventionally was considered unstable. Being spiritually oriented, creatively driven, trusting intuition over structure, that was considered unrealistic. But to me, it was alignment. Even socially, I could never fully conform, even when I tried. Buying a name brand just because it was a name never made sense to me. Why would I pay for someone else's label? I can buy a bag, but why does it have to be a Coach bag? It just never added up. Following trends never felt natural. Dressing loud, wearing white after Labor Day, breaking arbitrary rules that had no real foundation. I have always dressed how I felt, moved how I felt, chosen how I felt, and that put me in between. I could sit at one table and then the other. I could observe without dissolving. I could participate without performing. And I always took up for the underdogs, not because it made me noble, but because I could see the distortion in how humanity organizes itself. I could feel when someone was being minimized, when someone was being silenced, when someone was being labeled instead of understood. And I would not allow certain things in my presence, not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly. I wasn't just collecting data, I was studying patterns. I was noticing how quickly people conform, how reputation becomes identity, how tradition becomes law, and I was quietly deciding what I would and would not inherit. Present but slightly outside. And it was in those in between spaces that my awareness grew roots. It taught me how to sit with myself, how to be a part of something without dissolving into it, how to care without collapsing. My comfort in my own company is not isolation, it is intimacy with myself. And that intimacy is what allows me to hear the subtle nudges, the sprinkles, the breadcrumbs, the underlayers. That's where my awareness sharpened. That's where my perception deepened. That's where I learned that you can belong without blending in. The secret space. Being weird is your secret, not secret in a hidden way, secret in a sacred way. It is a private space inside you that no one should be able to take away. And I sometimes wonder if people ever stop to question why society works so hard to dim or banish the very things that set someone apart from the majority. Why is individuality labeled unstable? Why is deviation labeled dangerous? Why is originality labeled unrealistic? Anything that preserves your individuality threatens systems that benefit from uniformity. Anything that protects your internal compass disrupts structures that rely on external validation. So, of course, it gets labeled. Of course, it gets mocked. Of course, it gets called weird. But when something you are doing, some way you are being, feels the most aligned, the most natural, the most alive inside your body, why would your first instinct be to question it simply because you do not see anyone else doing it? I do not question the thing that makes me feel whole anymore. I question why I see so many people doing the same things. I question why repetition is rewarded more than authenticity. That is how I know my brain moves differently. Not better, differently. I don't automatically equate common with correct, and I no longer equate uncommon with wrong. My awareness is not something to shrink, it is something to guard. It is the part of me that keeps my energy intact. Because anything that consistently drains your individuality is not alignment, it is extraction. And I choose to keep what makes me distinct. My legacy thread. If my life ever becomes a story told after I am gone, I hope they say this: she refused to shrink. She questioned what she inherited. She redefined the words that once tried to define her. She did not trade her perception for approval. She guarded the secret space inside her and taught others to do the same. If being weird is what allowed me to see differently, then let it be known that different is not defective. Different is design. And I choose to honor mine. A whisper for you. Maybe the thing you've been trying to soften is the very thing that is meant to lead you. Maybe the part of you that feels slightly outside is not lost, it's position. Maybe your discomfort with sameness is not arrogance, it's awareness. You are allowed to redefine any word that once made you feel small. You are allowed to protect the part of you that feels the most natural. You are allowed to question what drains you. You are allowed to choose differently. And you are allowed to keep your weird sacred. Here are your journal prompts for this week's entry. Number 1, what part of myself have I labeled too much or too different, and who taught me that it was a problem? Number 2, where in my life do I feel most aligned and natural, even if no one around me mirrors it? Number 3, what belief system have I inherited that no longer feels true in my body? Number 4, if I fully embrace my weirdness as a strength instead of a flaw, what would I choose differently starting now? Thank you for witnessing this soul stream. Replay it or reread it whenever you need to come home to yourself. Until next time, stay soft, stay true, and keep streaming your soul your way. Love, Sim.